Welcome, everyone, to our Battery Seekers event tonight. I encourage you to please take your seats. I will make a couple of announcements before introducing our lovely speaker for the evening. So in case you didn't know, we are the Seeker Society, and we are one of the many societies at the Battery that you can join based on interests. If you haven't already joined our mailing list, please do so. That way you get all of our emails about events coming up. One of them that I would like to mention right now is our Seekers Community Dinner, which is our first ever Seekers Dinner, is happening on April 12th. We've just put together a lovely menu, 20 people for the wine cellar. It's going to sell out, so if you want to sign up as soon as you get notified, please do so. It's going to be Feed Your Spirit, Build Community Among Like-Minded Seekers over a Battery Dinner in the Wine Cellar. And it'll be with the 3 co-chairs right now. We're seeking a 4th co-chair or more, 4 or more, to help us put on these wonderful events for the rest of the year. And so if you're interested in becoming a co-chair, please talk to me or Michael in the back there after the event. We'd be happy to meet you. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker tonight. The topic is the future of love. Great topic for February. Katherine Woodward Thomas is the New York Times bestselling author of Conscious Uncoupling, 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After, a book which I just finished reading, because I'm in the middle of that, and Calling in the One, 7 Weeks to Attracting the Love of Your Life, as well as an award-winning marriage and family psychotherapist. Over the past 2 decades, Katherine has had the honor of teaching hundreds of thousands of people from all corners of the globe to create conscious, loving relationships, and to realize the higher potentials of all their connections hold for their health and happiness. Katherine also trains and certifies people to become certified Calling in the One coaches and or Conscious Uncoupling coaches, and provides ongoing supervision and development to a vibrant community of her coaches from all around the world. Also, she is a Billboard charting #1 iTunes jazz artist. Come on. What? Yeah, in her spare time. And with her CD, Lucky in Love, aptly titled Lucky in Love, I encourage you all to listen to it on iTunes. It's awesome, very inspiring, which was co-written and produced with the brothers Corin. So without further ado, please welcome Katherine Woodward Thomas.
Thank you, Denise, so much. Thank you. What a joy to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for having me in your beautiful home. I didn't even know you guys existed. I want to thank Michael, really, for facilitating being here, and Denise and Tom for having me here. Thank you so much. And I'd like to be one of the first to wish you a happy Valentine's week. And I also am wanting to just acknowledge that for some people in this room, it's not quite a happy Valentine's week. Maybe it's a little apprehensive or a little ambivalent, or maybe even a little grin and bear it and get through it. Valentine's, right? So we're depending on where we are in relationship, the day is going to land a little differently. And I think the big question for many of us, and I remember this from my own personal experience for a lot of years, was, Valentine's Day almost being like a confrontation of the question, will it ever happen for me? Will I ever get this right? Will I ever be lucky enough, fortunate enough, blessed by Cupid and the gods above to actually know true love? And I have a theory that February 14th might actually be the busiest day of the year for psychics. Not that I know anything about calling psychics about my love life. But maybe a few of us have called once or twice. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in this relationship? When is this person coming? Is this the right person for me? And I get it. It's great, to really be able to be supported by psychics. I love psychics. I really appreciate their gifts. But I also know that there is no fixed future. And that what a psychic can do really is kind of predict by reading the field, should there be no interference, should there be no assertion of another possible future. I really saw this one time when I was doing a calling in the one group in Los Angeles. It was in the early days. It was before we all went online. So we had about 30 people in the room. And I knew this one woman named Tori, who actually herself was a psychic, going to a psychic. And she's a wonderful person, also an author and writer. She's really, really special woman. And she came to class the first night, and she was kind of crushed. Like, we all went around the room, and everybody talked and introduced themselves and what they were standing for. And because calling in the one is all about standing for a really completely unreasonable, unpredictable future. And so she comes in, and she sits down, and she's really kind of collapsed in on herself. And when it's her turn to speak, she said, "Look, I went to my psychic yesterday, and he said, 'I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you have no love in your future.'" So she said, "But I'm here anyway, and I'm going to just give it my all. I don't know what the universe is doing, but I'm going to do my part. And I'm just going to set an intention for love and live into that future no matter what." And to her credit, she really did. She showed up. She did the exercises. She did the practices. She held a high watch for herself. She went back to her psychic about 4 weeks later for a completely unrelated thing that had to do with work and business. And the psychic said to her, when he kind of did his tarot cards, and he gasped, he said, "What did you do? You just changed your whole future. Let me tell you about your husband." So I think it's very important for us to avail ourselves of all of the healing arts, all of the energetic arts, all of the people who are here to support us along the journey, but to never give our power away to what anybody tells you about a future, or even sometimes what we project onto the future, which is usually more of the same. And we probably have a lot of evidence, given that we've lived certain patterns. Most of us have been trying to figure our love lives out for a while by now. How many of you have ever been to a therapist to talk about your love life? Right? And I'm a therapist, so I love therapy. And I actually say that therapy saved my life. But I also acknowledge that it didn't necessarily change my life. And what I mean by that is that I did a lot of healing work, which I really needed to do. But after a decade of therapy, I still had unavailable people showing up. I still had married men constantly beating down my door, and no available, single, appropriate people even noticing that I walked into the room. So what I have since discovered is that healing is the domain of the past. Very important to go back and, process the unprocessed grief, be witnessed, give name to what happened, begin to notice where you hold it in your body, all of that beautiful, beautiful work that we do as therapists. Some of, my most sacred conversations were when I was doing psychotherapy. But if you actually want to shift a pattern that's been with you for decades, if you actually want to step outside of resignation and the inertia of yet, another narcissistic person coming into my life, or yet another alcoholic or unavailable or needy person coming into my life, somehow the relationship is kind of doomed from the start. You actually have to start with the future, because future is the domain of transformation. And when you stand for an unprecedented, unpredictable future for yourself that just looks almost impossible from your current vantage point, what happens is that future will begin to pull you into who you need to be in order to fulfill it. So I learned this not until I was in my 40s. I've actually been doing personal development work since I was doing spiritual work when I was a teenager. But my personality work that needed to be done kind of crashed and burned, where I was non-functional with a eating disorder, with all of the unprocessed grief and anxiety that I had inside of me from trauma and my upbringing. So I went into 12-step and therapy and transformational seminars and learned to meditate and all of that work that I was doing about kind of duct taping my psyche back together again, or maybe together for the very first time. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I actually had the privilege of learning how to set an intention for a future that looked like it could never happen, in an area that had been completely filled with suffering and heartache to that point. And I called up a dear friend. There was about a group of us, maybe 6 of us, and we were all setting intentions for different things. And I had just had, coming off the tail end of yet another failed love affair. And I called a friend from this group and I said, okay, I'm going to set an intention. And this took all my courage. I was terrified to say this to her. But I'm going to set an intention to be engaged by my 42nd birthday. And she answered me by saying one of the most important things that anyone has ever said to me. She said, Katherine, I will hold that intention with you and for you if you give me permission to hold you accountable for being the woman you would need to be in order for that to happen. And because my friend had the wisdom to answer me like that, instead of running out to try and now make something happen, which, oh, by the way, I'd only been doing for 20 years, I really recognized that it started with me, and that even though I had been working on myself for so long, in many ways, the insights that I had about my own unconscious my belief systems, or how I didn't value myself, or how alone I felt, in many ways I felt kind of victimized by my own subconscious. But somehow, where is the subconscious anyway? It's kind of like in my body somewhere, but I didn't have access to actually having life show up outside of that. So when I suddenly had the courage and the clarity to set an intention, I began meditating every morning and asking the universe, what would that actually feel like to have that in my life? What might that look like? What might it sound like, smell like, taste like? To have someone in my life who was really there for me. And then I would feel into this self, a self that I didn't even recognize or know. That would be someone who would be chosen by someone who I would choose. And then I would ask a series of 3 questions. And you don't have to write them down because I'm going to actually take you through it. The first question was asking life, okay, what will I need to give up today, right now? What will I need to release from my life in order to find my way to this possible future? And I'd listen for the answer. I find that when you ask the universe these questions, you get the answers. They come to you pretty quickly. So some days I would hear things like, clean out your closet, make room for someone else to put their things. It wasn't until I had actually asked this question for the first time that I suddenly noticed that even though I had a double bed, it was pushed up against the wall so you could only get into it from one side. And then there were all these books on the other side of the bed. Right, so it's things like that, all the feng shui of it, designing your environment for the future that you're standing for. But I also had deeper understandings inside of that question. And it wasn't necessarily just a psychological insight. It was a pathway to actually be able to move forward. So one of the things that I got was that I had this deep sense that I was alone, which of course we can trace these things back to when you're in the crib or you're a toddler or some event. Maybe, maybe it was an acute trauma. Maybe it was a developmental trauma, like you had an alcoholic parent or a depressed parent or a narcissistic parent or a rageaholic parent, and you didn't get to develop certain things. But we all have this kind of core sense of self that develops around intimacy and love. And I noticed that mine was that I'm alone, and that inside of feeling so alone, it didn't even occur to me to have an expectation that someone would actually be available to be there for me before I let them into my heart and into my bed. It just didn't even occur to me as a criteria, which is how I kept getting involved with married men. Before that, it was just kind of like, it's just destiny that this keeps happening. It's like fate. It's my fate to somehow be, living this story. Maybe it's my ancestors. Maybe I'm living out some pattern from my great-great-great-great-grandmother. Maybe I just am love avoidant and I have a fear of intimacy. See, we take these things and we make them into psychological issues. And there's a lot of therapists making a lot of money from all of our issues. But see, I actually wanted to transform my life. I didn't want to understand anymore. That was the gift that I had gotten for working on myself for so many years. I mean, I got to the point where I'd go to therapists and they'd fire me because I knew more than they did. So it's not so much about understanding ourselves, right? Not Eckhart Tolle. Werner Erhard once said, understanding is the booby prize. But it's about being able to actually see how when I'm anchored in that consciousness, that I make choices and take actions that actually generate more of the same, that I am the source of my own experience. It's not some subconscious thing, it's actually the choices I'm making, the actions I'm taking, and some of it was just missing understanding, missing development. So what I did is, as I saw these things, I started to up the ante, I started to change, I started to show up differently. And that impacted everything. And the moment I did that, guess what? Available men started coming into my life. And I actually had one guy propose that I turned down because I didn't think he was really right for me. But that was a real breakthrough for me because I hadn't been proposed to since I was 18 years old. I'm 41 now, right? But I started to actually show up differently a few months before that. Or actually, I have to give a backstory. So this is 25 years ago. Okay, I'm telling you a story about 25 years ago. It's the beginning of Calling in the One. Calling in the One has been out for about almost 20 years at this point. And 25 years ago, there was no internet dating. I mean, there was just the beginning, but nobody had their pictures. So people would just have like a handle, like 2 hearts beating is 1. Right? And Los Angeles, which is where I lived at the time. Non-smoker wants kids. Like, that's all you knew, right? So anyway, and they had like a little paragraph about themselves. So I got on and I'm reading through these profiles. There were 250,000 people who were all on that site looking for love. I end up just responding to one person, completely anonymously. The next day he wrote me back. Back then it came right into your "you've got mail" inbox, because we all had AOL back then. And it was a man I had dated 3 years earlier who I had been thinking of as the one that got away for years. And we were engaged 2 months ahead of deadline. How's that? So that was the beginning of Calling in the One. But as we all know, relationships are not a place where we arrive. And I still had a lot to learn. And for a few years it was wonderful, and then it wasn't. And we ended up in, but not before I wrote Calling in the One, had literally hundreds of thousands of people following my advice. And then Mark and I decided we were getting divorced. And so that day when we figured that out, I went to the park and I prayed the only prayer I knew how to pray. What the F are you thinking, God? That was my big prayer. But that ended up becoming the seeds of conscious uncoupling because we did it so beautifully and elegantly. I mean, I was the product of a very nasty divorce. It was the source of a lot of my, psychological issues. He also was the product of a divorce where he lost contact with his mother. I had lost contact with my father. So we just decided we were going to do this well so that our daughter would have a happy childhood. And whatever her issues were in life were not going to be related to us getting divorced. So we just decided to create a new form of family, and that ended up becoming the 5 steps of conscious uncoupling that Gwyneth Paltrow so beautifully popped into the lexicon right on cue. So a few years went by, and I decided I wanted to use my own process. I was ready to call in another love. But all of us doubt. All of us have our reasons why maybe it won't happen for us. So at this time, I'm in my 60s. And of course, what are my chances? Remember that magazine article that someone wrote about being, a woman over 45 has a better chance of being, a victim of a terrorist than getting married to a great guy? Isn't that horrible? It stuck in a lot of us, right? As our negative possible future that we wanted to avoid at all costs, but secretly feared would be true. So that's the future that we were trying to not have. But so I had my own doubts, and I always say if even just 1% of you believes that in that possible future that you desire for yourself, that miracle future. And look, I'm talking about calling in the one, but some of you are in relationship and you long for that relationship to be working, and it's not working, and it's painful, and it's push-pull, in, out, unstable. And some of you, are like, I don't know if I ever want to go through that again because I have my heart broken, and I know what that feels like. And I'll come and talk about the future of love, but the future of love, not now. The future of love, maybe one day. Or I'm coming here because I wanted to bring my friend here. Or I'm here because maybe, there's nothing else to do. And I should do something for Valentine's week. Right, so I decide that I want to call in the one again, and I've got all of my doubts, but I do notice that there's 1% of me that does believe this is possible. So I go back into my practice. Oh, and the 3 questions, which I am going to bring you through it. So the 3 questions, the first one is, what would I need to let go of? The second question is, how will I need to grow? How will I need to grow in my relationship with myself? If you have a lot of narcissists finding their way into your world, it probably means that you become somewhat invisible to yourself, that other people's feelings and needs are front and foremost, but that you get disconnected from your own. So there's development that needs to happen in order to have love between equals, in order to be met, in order to have a mature, healthy, count-onable, stable love. So there's inner development within, there's they call it intra-development, our ability to self-soothe when we're upset so that we're not just reacting when we feel threatened. We can take a breath, we can calm down, we can speak like a sane adult as opposed to a, enraged 7-year-old. Right, so there's growth that needs to happen in order to become who we would need to be in order to have the fulfillment of the future that we long for. And then, of course, there's the interpersonal skills. How do we negotiate our needs? How do we set boundaries? What are appropriate boundaries? How does boundary differ from a wall? All of those things. So how do I need to grow is the second question. And then what's my next step? And that's a very important question, because it's not just about wishing or hoping or praying. It's not even just about visualizing. It's actually about co-creating. We are the co-creators of our own future. And what we're longing for, what we want to happen for us has to come through us. So we have to grow ourselves in the direction of our dream, and that means action on the court. And the problem with, the psychotherapy, and I don't do psychotherapy for this reason. I'm still a licensed therapist. I love therapy as a profession. I'm working on actually creating a new form of it. And I know that, there's a lot of very progressive therapists who are also feeling this too. But insight alone is not enough. Just understanding why we are the way that we are is insufficient to transform our lives. We have to actually be willing to take risks, to trust our deeper knowing, to learn things, to show up differently, to clean up the past, to own our mistakes, to have humility, to recognize our own projections, to apologize when we do that to someone. We have to learn how to really grow ourselves differently, and that's very much in action. So anyway, so what do? I mean, look, the first time I called in the one, I made a vision board. That's in calling in the one. How many of you ever made a vision board? Yeah, well, the thing about the vision board, I mean, there's sometimes they have a certain magic to them, but the vision boards, what happens when you're creating the vision board is more important than the vision board itself. Right? Because what you're basically doing when you're looking at images and pictures and you're owning certain things or certain words is you're owning that for yourself. You're claiming that for yourself. So that's the importance of a vision board. But I actually had the opportunity, since you've outed me as a singer, songwriter, so I had the opportunity to work with the Brothers Corin. If you don't know them, they're amazing. They've opened for Coldplay and for Pink. They're artists that are pretty extraordinary. So when I met them and they wanted to do a CD with me, I said, okay, I hadn't done any singing in like 20 years, but I love them and I'm so grateful they did that. So I decided that I'm going to do an album called Lucky in Love because I felt unlucky in love, but the future I wanted was to be lucky in love. So I wrote a 7-song CD that was all about my transformation. And I started with a breakup song because I'm coming off of Conscious Uncoupling. And I went into then, different stages along the way, getting ready for love, starting to open your heart to other people. But the song that I was really struggling with was the song about the having of love, like the pinnacle, like what we're all doing it for. Like, what does it actually feel like to have this as though it's now? Right? Because when you're listening for the law of attraction stuff, you'll hear people talking about you've got to feel it like it's yours now. You have to resonate at that level. Now, you don't have to walk around all the time resonating at that level in order to shift something permanently. But you do have to really lean in to try it on and really strive. Like, what would it feel like to be living that? So I called up Isaac Corin and I told him I'm having a hard time with this. I think it's because I'm nervous about it. I don't really want to try it on. And he talked me off the ledge. He just said, okay, let's just move into it. Like, what would it really look like and feel like and sound like? And within a few minutes, I was centered and calm. I got off the phone with him. And I wrote the following lyric. Sitting by the fire on a Saturday night, reading David Whyte by the flickering light, I look up and you're smiling. It's only been a year since the night that we wed, when we danced till dawn, then lay flowers in our bed as the sun started rising. Could we grow roots like a tree, go as deep as the sea together? Could we expand like the sky and sail right on by bad weather? For once in my life, I can hear the music to my song. Everything's right. As I listen to you sing along, harmonize on and on, I love you. And so we went in and recorded the song. I did not have a title for the song. We're calling it the I Love You song, which is, if you're a songwriter, it's a terrible name for a song. But we went in and we recorded it, and I started performing it. but we still didn't have a name for the song. And as we're getting ready to release the CD, I meet Michael in a very unusual, magical way, as is typical when you're living into a future, or should I say from that future backwards, and you're creating from consciousness, not like making something happen, but making it welcome at the depth of your being. And without knowing each other very well, he certainly didn't know about this song. He sent me a David White poem. What's that? The True Love? Oh, you know what? I don't think it was that one, but he's coming soon, he'll tell you. So now the song is named Michael's Song. And that's the song that went on the CD that then became the #1 iTunes in the category of jazz. So I love to share these the magic that we inspire. I mean, I think we inspire the universe. I like to think we inspire God when we have the courage to stand for a future that looks unreasonable and unprecedented, and begin actually, taking that future as though it's our North Star against which we measure all of our actions and all of our decisions, all of our choices, and even hold ourselves accountable to be, and give, a few trusted others who can really see the possibility with us and who are relentless in holding space for that possibility. You have to be careful who you share your intentions with, because they're fragile. They're strong, but they're fragile. And if you want to notice the consciousness of the people around you, to be able to hold a positive, possible future. And then you might even want to give that person, permission to hold you accountable for who you'd need to be. And it will always cost you something. There will always be something you need to let go of in order to become that version of yourself. But it's a glorious, glorious journey, and a very fruitful one. So I want to bring you through the practice where you get to try on that practice that was so powerful, that's really the foundation of the Calling in the One work. Are you guys up for that? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, good. So if you're comfortable doing so, I just invite you to uncross your legs and put everything down. And close your eyes. And begin by taking a nice deep breath, as though you could breathe all the way down into your hips. Moving into a place of deep listening and receptivity. As if you could open your inner eyes, begin to see that which is invisible. And open your inner ears so that you can begin to hear your own deeper knowing. And becoming aware of all of the feelings and sensations in your body. Noticing where you're holding any tension, and as you find it, just letting it go. And with each breath, just allowing yourself to soften into a state of surrender, recognizing that you are supported by your unseen but benevolent ancestors and guides. Even imagining that you have angels to the left of you and angels to the right of you. Angels before you and angels behind you. Angels above you and angels below. Recognizing that the miracle that you have been praying for, yearning for, the longing in your heart that lives as a divine urgency, as poet John Donahue would call longing, that all of it is sacred, that the desires of your heart are the beginning of the creative process. It's life's way of working with you to open, to transform yourself, to begin to co-create with the energies of life. There is no fixed future. Your past does not determine the possibilities of your life. And so in this moment, I invite you to just name that longing in your heart. And actually set it as an intention. And try on in consciousness, using your imagination, what it might look like to be living as though that intention were already fulfilled now. And just letting your mind get snippets, snapshots of what it might look like. Sitting by the fire on a Saturday night. What does it look like? What does it sound like? Just letting yourself hear the laughter, hear the lovemaking. What does it taste like? Imagining the sharing of a meal, the toasting of champagne. What does it smell like? Fresh flowers from the garden. Your favorite wine. Freshly shampooed hair, just getting it in your body, imagining that you have this now. Just trying it on, stretching yourself. Visiting the future of love right now, bringing it into the present. Allowing your heart to open and receive love, forgiveness, kindness, being met. And just noticing who you are here. You are safe. You are a person who is wildly happy in love. You are open, kind. You are supported, seen, heard, valued, honored, respected. I'm just saying yes with your whole body to this possible future, turning your full attention to the part of you that does believe it's possible, leaving resignation off to the side. It will be there waiting for you, I assure you, particularly in moments of challenges. So in this moment, we give ourselves to that possible future, stepping into that as our primary reality. And now we want to ask the universe 3 questions. This first question: What will I now need to release from my life and let go of in order to find my way to this positive, beautiful, happy, healthy, joyful future? What will I need to give up? Maybe it's being right. Maybe it's punishing myself. Maybe it's isolating. Maybe it's drinking too much. Just listen to your knowing. What will I need to give up? And how will I need to grow? How will I need to grow in my relationship with myself and in how I show up with others? Maybe I need to learn how to care for my body or connect with my own deeper feelings and needs. Maybe I need to learn how to speak my truth, stand for myself. Maybe I need to learn how to set healthy boundaries and stop sourcing my value from over-giving all the time. Learn how to give when giving is appropriate, and then not give when it's not. Take the risk that someone might leave to honor myself. How will I now need to grow? And final question, what is my next step in order to find my way to this beautiful future, to manifest this future, to weave this possible future into the manifest world? What's my very next step? And just listen for it. Call your sister and say you're sorry. Clean up your finances. Stop binging on sugar. Go to OA. What's my next step? And now just say thank you to the universe because you just set a partnership in motion. And open yourself up to receiving guidance, honoring your own deeper knowing, and just ending this visioning with a sense of gratitude. Thank you to life for giving us the option of recognizing how much power we are actually holding to influence what comes our way. So it is, so it shall be. Amen. When you're ready, just open your eyes. So we're working with consciousness. It isn't a, how to make it happen. It's more like, it's not like, we're all so much, like, what do I need to do? This is more really, who do I need to be? Who do I need to be being? And it is the highest and the best of you. None of us want to go out and recreate our pattern again. And we can sit there and diagnose our former, exes up the yin-yang. A lot of recognition on that one. I think he's a narcissist. Well, maybe he is, but then what are you doing being someone who's a co-narcissist? That's what you want to be focused on. In conscious uncoupling, I like to say, even if it's 97% the other person's fault, the most interesting inquiry is what's my 3%? Because that's where the change happens. And until you get that part, frankly, you're probably going to put up walls to love it because you can't really trust yourself to not do it again. right? So we have to grow through all these experiences. But I think I remember when I was doing all my years of therapy, all my years and years and years, and at some point I started doing, is there like an end point to this? And I'm really happy to tell you, yes, there is. That you really can create a life that you love, that's yours to be living. And that the longings that you have, they're good. That's the part of you that's healthy. That's the part of you that knows that something else is supposed to be happening here. And I just want to affirm how right you are about that. Okay, so I want to stop talking now a bit, and I want to give you guys a chance to talk. How's that? Okay.
Hello? Okay, great. This is the fun part where we get to ask questions. I get to ask the first question. So thank you so much for your presence here tonight and for guiding our consciousness with your love wisdom. It's amazing. So I call this love alchemy. I've heard her book by my bedside for a couple years. And when we decided the theme for Seekers was going to be consciousness, exploring consciousness, I was like looking at the title of your book by my bed. I'm like, conscious uncoupling. That could be a really good talk for the battery. So can you just maybe, I have a question about conscious uncoupling. Okay. For those of us who maybe called in our partner, either consciously or unconsciously, right? And then maybe
unconscious coupling.
Unconscious coupling. Conscious coupling. Maybe at the time we thought it was conscious, but maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Or we didn't have the skills to sustain it.
Right.
Right? So there's the gift of falling in love, but then it actually requires skills.
Work.
And can I just say, before you've even finished your question, can I just say something about that? So we have to get that consciousness is moving, right? So we're not who our mothers were, or our grandmothers, or grandfathers. Like, if you look back at the movies in the 40s, it was like, I love you, John. Oh, I love you too, Mary. Let's get married. And the music swells. And then they lived together for 50 years. So, we have a lot more happening than our mothers and our grandmothers had. So consciousness is moving. And I forgot why I was saying that. Why was I saying that? I don't know. Oh, so what we're longing for now is not what our grandmothers were longing for. Our grandmothers, when they were looking for a husband, they were looking for someone who had a job, who didn't drink too much, and who smelled nice.
Yeah.
That was the criteria.
Right. Check, check, check.
Check, check,
That
check.
guy.
Okay. So if you think about what your hunger is, to be met, to be with someone who really sees you, who sees not just who you are, but who you have the potential to be, who's your intellectual equal, who is your financial superior, or somebody who's just fiscally responsible.
Right.
But integrity, devotion, thoughtfulness, spirituality, depth, self-awareness. Like, we want a lot.
Yeah.
So it's forcing us to all grow. So we have to get, like, no generation has ever done what we're trying to do. This love between equals thing. Mm-hmm. So the expectations that we have is that it should just be that way, but it's pushing on all of us to grow. So that was my marriage to Mark, right?
Yeah, so it's two conscious people coming together in relationship, right? And they're going to evolve at different rates, paces. Maybe one evolves, maybe one doesn't evolve, or they both evolve, but they evolve in different directions. So how do you do that? In a sustainable way, so that you're evolving your relationship together, but you're not responsible for the other person.
Yeah. Well, so there's, I'm a big fan. One of my favorite teachers now is Polly Young Eisendrath. And Polly lives in Vermont, so it would be a bit of a chore to get her out here for a speaking engagement. But she wrote a book called Love Between Equals. And Polly, one of the things I love that Polly talks about was the sovereign self. I don't think she calls it that, but it's really having a certain sovereignty. She talks about each of us in our own snow globe. Because the places that we get to in relationship very often is like, no, I'm right about that. No, what are you talking about? It didn't happen that way. It happened like this. You're crazy, right? No, it happened like that. So Polly like kind of disappears that whole thing, and she just says we all have, like we're all in our own snow globe. We all have our own perceptions. And so you build skills around just getting the other person and staying engaged and interested in where they are, but they don't have to be the same with you. I mean, I think that, one of the things that we all point to around relationship is you want to be in a relationship with someone who has the same values as you, right? Because then you have a framework within that. But you were in a relationship for a long time.
Long
with
time,
him.
yes. I have 15-year-old twins, 17-year marriage.
Okay, so here's the thing.
But we're friends now. We're
Well,
co-parents.
that's beautiful. But the lifespan has more than doubled in the last 100 years. And when happily even after is like a new paradigm on planet Earth. Do you guys get that? It was created when the lifespan was less than 40. And where there was no mobility, like nobody had any choices. Like you were born into the carpentry family and you became a carpenter.
There was no internet.
There was no internet, believe it or not. But there was a locked-in class structure even. Like if you look at the happily ever after myth, that myth always came with upward mobility at the end, right? Like a pauper princess or pauper woman becomes the princess because she meets the prince, and everyone's lifted up into prosperity. So you have to get that myth was created in Venice, Italy in the 16th century. And in the 16th century in Venice, Italy, there was a law on the books that forbid a noble person from marrying a commoner. So commoners had no way out. And half the children were dying before they reached their 15th birthday. So there was a lot of suffering. It was a very different world. So when Happily Ever After kind of was introduced, because they were a literate group, because it was right after the Renaissance, so people knew how to read. So when I can't remember his name in this moment, but there was an Italian gentleman who popularized these fairy tales, and they went like wildfire. Like everyone started eating them up and loved them, and that's actually where the happily ever after myth took root. And then, of course, it spread to other countries. But now we take it like God made the mountains, God made the sun, God made it so if a relationship is successful, I should live happily ever after. But that's not accurate. And it's not the norm for any of us, really. Most of us are slated statistically. I'm not advocating for it because I'm all for long-term love. But most of us are slated for 2 to 3 significant relationships in our lifetime. So we have to learn how to end well. And we don't do that well because our biology is not caught up with our culture. And 1,000 years ago, if you wandered away from your tribe, you probably would die. So we go into fight or flight, like our lives are threatened because someone's leaving us. And it's a huge trauma, but it's life and death stakes, and that's where we go to war. And I have a theory that we go and do really destructive things that create really bad toxic karma for us and for other people, certainly for our children if we have children. Just instinctively we'll go to war in that way because it's almost like our brains are so hardwired to stay connected that our brains would rather create a negative bond than have no bond at all, or transition to a lesser bond. And if you think about the people that you hate, you're very actively engaged with those people. So we go from soulmate to soul hate quite easily, which you're not doing.
No, and my children thank you, and I thank you on their behalf because they see that relationships transition. And they'll go through relationships that can transition kindly from, boyfriend, girlfriend, to then just friend, to like, wingman or whatever.
Yeah, or not. I mean, sometimes if people do sociopathic, mean, terrible things, if they're not trustworthy, you can't build a friendship with that. Love is unconditional, but relationships are not. Y'all get that, right? Because relationships require trust. So you actually have to have the capacity to show up and be your word and be honorable and not do damage to each other when you're upset. Stan Tatkins talks about protecting your partner from the worst of yourself. That's one of his kind of rules for healthy relationship, is to actively protect your partner. So, a lot of us think, oh, communication, I can just communicate whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm thinking. No, don't do that. Do not do that. You can't undo that very often. Sometimes those wounds stay with people for years.
So I recommend her book, both Conscious Uncoupling, if you're in that, they're back there, or also Calling in the One, which you also offer as a course through Mind Valley, which I've been taking, which I wake up to your meditations. Amazing. It's also like relationship alchemy. So even if you're not calling in somebody, it's like working on yourself, which is really beautiful to have her as a love mentor. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm feeling like there's some burning love questions in the audience here. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and I will come to you with the mic.
Thank you, Denise.
I just wonder if the one might be language for upgrade, since it sounds like if the language of the one might be something we could upgrade, or did you stand by the one, or that idea of like one?
Well, if you're asking me, am I an advocate of just one true love that we're destined to be with in a lifetime? Clearly, that is not what I'm an advocate for. But Michael is my one. He's the one. When I was with Mark, he was the one, right? The ones. I have had people do calling in the ones as well. Yeah. No, I try and honor whatever that looks like for people and not impose my own perspective on that. What's your thought on it?
I just wonder, as you thinking about manifesting the one, and that could be, I don't know, since I was asking you, I don't have an answer. But.
Well, I think, it depends on what you desire. So what's your heart's desire? Do you want to be that visible? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I got it, Denise.
Sorry.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
I have read Calling in the One, and I am so moved by your work, and just being able to be in your presence really means a lot to me. I'm sorry if I was getting a little emotional, but I feel very seen by you, and it means so much to me to be able to be here and meet you. And the Battery is a community of really exceptional people. There's a lot of folks here who are serial overachievers, and who have been able to do great things because we set our mind to it, right? Like, I'm gonna get that job, I'm gonna start this company, I'm gonna swim the English Channel, I'm gonna be the mayor of my town. Those things happen in this community. And for me personally, I feel like those are things you can control, right? You can set goals, and there's actionable steps you can take to get to them. And I'm wondering why for love, it feels so out of your control, even if you are sometimes manifesting it. And when every other detail of your life can feel like you can go get it if you believe in it, but it's so hard to believe in finding the one sometimes. And your book helped me find someone that was very transformative for me. It didn't work out. I started doing your book again. What I love about your book is you're so honest, because you say, if you stop doing it at some point, you should look at why it's taking you 6 months to do it. And the second time around, my friend Andy and I started doing it, and our group kind of fell apart. And I'm wondering why, why does it feel so hard to manifest something when everything
it's
else
really treacherous territory, and that's why it's good to have friends that you're doing it with, because you have to hold each other's hands. And I find that disappointment is one of the biggest triggers for kind of going back into a collapse into an old story. It's never going to happen for me. I'm alone in this lifetime. It's my destiny to just be there for others, but no one's going to really be there for me, or whatever that story is. And you have a lot of evidence for that story. And so there's to change your story is quite a heroic effort. And I always say that, setting an intention for love is kind of like saying, I'm going to win the gold medal. It can be that much of a gap. So I'm glad that you guys have each other. That's wonderful. And I do think that there are different systems of creativity, of creation. And I kind of put them into the domain of the masculine, the feminine, which is not women and men, because we're all kind of have access to both domains. But our culture values the masculine way of creating a lot more. You know, in order to do something, you have to kind of get the whole business plan and you're going to map it all out, and then you're going to make it happen. And you know, for most of the stuff we're creating, if you want to build a building, you better know how many bricks you need and exactly what the square foot. I mean, you don't want the sink in the living room, you know, so that's a good system to create things. But if you're looking to create something like true love, you can't do that system, right? So it's an alive, active, creative process, and that's why I talk about your own intuitive knowing. Because you don't get the whole picture at once. You get like the next step, and you have to be in action about it. So it's almost like you're following the gumdrops in the forest. And I think that's true really for any kind of act of creativity where you're creating something you've never had before, or no one in your family ever had it before. And so it's quite an effort. It has to be front and center in your life. And just like an athlete who has bad days and kind of, you know, feels like it's never going to happen, we need our team around us to say, you can do it, you know. That's why I like to keep people close, and I train coaches so that people have someone there that's holding their hand. But when it happens, then you look back and you're so grateful you stayed the course, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Your book is incredibly inspiring. I was reading it by my bedside table for months. But I read it first and then went back to do some of the exercises. And I guess one of the questions I have is around how do you get really honest with yourself about the things that are truly the things you need to work with? Like, how do you access that real honesty? Because there's so many things, you have examples of like, it could be this, it could be that, and it could be many things, but like, if you're really zoning in, how do you do that?
I will say that I think for all of our sophistication in doing our inner work, the place that we are not sophisticated yet is understanding ourselves as the source of our experience. And that's what you're asking about. So it's an area that we're confused about, and very often what will happen is that when I ask myself, well, okay, so I have all these unavailable people showing up, how am I the source of my experience? Well, very often going to, well, my mother was a narcissist, so, or my father was absent, or, you know, we kind of go into understanding ourselves again. Or we collapse into some kind of version of the conversation, like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that this keeps happening for me? Why to other people it doesn't seem to be happening to them? So neither of those conversations access any power. You know, they might be interesting things to engage, or then we go into, well, there's, you know, I live in San Francisco, really. How many, you know, straight single men are in San Francisco? Right, so I'm just saying, and then you're going to blame the culture, you know, and your circumstances, and it's not like there's not an interesting conversation to be had, but again, there's no access to power. So when it comes to how am I the source of my experience, first of all, why would we ask ourselves that way when there's so many people to blame? Why would I ask myself?
Yeah, it was transforming to read the way you think that, yeah.
Well, if I can really get, you know, that inside of, you know, feeling insecure about myself, that what I do is I overgive to try and prove my value. But all it's doing is kind of covertly communicating that I don't really value myself, so you shouldn't either. So then I'm the source of my experience. We're really looking at who am I being in relationship? Where am I centered in consciousness? You know, and where I go right down to the core consciousness at the level of identity, because the identity was created when we were very young. That's why we need our friends, because the moment you get disappointed, you collapse into, see, I'm not wanted, or see, I'm not safe. Right? Somehow I'm cursed in love. Other people are blessed, but not me. I live with this cloud of a curse. So that's consciousness. That's what beliefs are. And they feel very real. And most of us are overly identified with those stories, and we actually believe everything that we feel.
Yeah.
And so how do we get outside of that enough? Well, in the Calling in the One work, in week 3, the exercises are about being able to learn, where that self is in your body, how old that part of you is, and then from your adult self to get into relationship with that part of you. So that you have a relationship then, and we call that your false love identity. And to awaken to your true love identity is where you need to be centered when you're navigating relationship and the kind of, crazy time of calling in love, because you really have to do it from that center. From the false center, we can look at all sorts of ways of showing up that are organic to that center. So for example, inside of the I'm alone false center, I'm going to present myself as very self-sufficient.
Yes. Yeah.
Did I get you? I don't really need anyone. I'm fine. Let me give to you because I'm so okay. So there's an absence of vulnerability. So there's an absence of vulnerability, but love actually happens inside of being vulnerable with each other. That's when love can actually happen. So I didn't know that myself for years. Remember, well, it is a practice. It is remembering to be vulnerable. So if you have like an I'm alone because you were a latchkey kid or you had to fend for yourself at a young age for whatever reason, you just learned how to figure that out, it becomes its own prison as an adult because nobody can really find their way into your world because it doesn't even occur to you to be vulnerable. Here, use the microphone because there's people on the...
Your thing that struck me in your book about looking around at your art and also was looking around like, wow, there's all these images of single, like independent, really strong, alone women. I've been married.
Hanging on my walls, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have, been married, I've been in relationships, but it was fascinating to me. I was like, oh my God, like the first few pages of your book, and it's, you had me at the first few pages from that.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and then even when you create relationship,
Yeah.
you somehow create estrangement in the relationship. So
Yeah.
how do you do that? Because it's easy to look at the other person,
Right. Yeah.
but how is it that you're creating that?
Right.
Because that's where, the moment you go, oh my gosh, and you get it,
Yeah.
I need to take the risk to be vulnerable. And that's not always going to feel good because sometimes you're vulnerable and other people don't respond.
Yeah, or take advantage or what have you. Yeah.
Right? So you have to learn how to hold and contain your own experience. And what you do is you start showing up in different ways as an act of self-love to be in integrity with what you're standing to create. Whatever happens out here, that's where your focus is. So we're not trying to make it happen,
Right.
but you're growing yourself in the direction of your dream. My friend Michael Beckwith once said, don't look for your dreams to come true. Look to be true to your dreams. Right.
Yeah.
And we're talking about consciousness. I mean, it's really an ontological domain. Who are you being? Ontology is the philosophy of being.
Well, thank you for your wisdom.
No, thanks for the question. Okay.
Hi. I'm curious about sort of longevity of love. And you obviously wrote a book about finding yourself and opening up and then being ready and then found love and then decided that wasn't right for you. And like how I sort of do believe in one forever. So what are the things that you think about in terms of finding that, holding that, keeping that? And especially, I mean, you sound like you don't mind us putting you on the spot, but for someone who wrote about that and then decided, well, didn't work for me, or, there's multiple options. It's hard to reconcile in my head. And from somebody who went through my own divorce and everything, like, it's it's painful. It's hard to trust yourself again. Yeah. And what do you think?
Well, first of all, anyone who says when they want to call in the one, this is my forever love, I'm 1,000% all in. I, at this point, can talk casually about my breakup with Mark, but it was never without its complexity. And frankly, when I look back at some of the things I did or said or who I was being in that relationship, I feel really sad. And I feel that I wish I was more mature and that I knew more. And hopefully, I pray for Mark on a very regular basis. I really love Mark. And I didn't do some of the things that I now know to do to keep love alive and to keep rebonding over and over. I didn't kind of know when I was in my first marriage that you have to really recreate and reinvest and re-choose that person like a spiritual practice over and over again. So I can now love Michael very differently. And so the love I have with Michael is much richer, not because Michael's a better person than Mark, but because I'm more mature and more seasoned. What happens when we go through a breakup is that I think of breakups as a crossroads. And very often a breakup will contract people away from life. I'll never do that again. I've met people a decade, 2 decades after, who've never had so much as a date after a bad breakup. Or you get kind of bitter and blame, or worse yet, you act out, which I don't think you are at all, because obviously you're very tender and sensitive about it, but maybe you did. Who knew? I mean, everybody wants to be conscious at the end of love. I mean, most people, nobody wants to be, pouring bleach on his best suits. But what happens emotionally in a breakup is so intense. And then, it goes on and on. It's not like an event, like a one-day thing. You got to then, divide time with your kids, and now you're losing your house, and now your portfolio's going down, and now, all sorts of losses, and now that person's not talking to you anymore, and that was your friend before. So it's a multitude of losses over a long period of time. So many people do really contract away and get very bitter and behave even badly. It's kind of a litmus test for character, I think, because sometimes the only thing that keeps you going is that you are a decent person, and no matter what you're feeling, you're going to behave decently, right? So you get through that, to get through that time in a way that actually teaches you what to do differently moving forward. That's the conscious uncoupling journey. So that you can trust yourself to love again, and you can bring all of your wisdom into the next relationship, and you can make an amends to yourself and to others moving forward. One of the things that I think is hard about a breakup, if you can look back and see some mistakes that you made, is you don't get to go back and undo those mistakes with the person that was harmed. But you can pay forward the amends and do things very differently with others and become a better person who's more capable of creating happiness and love for the long term. So, we don't get to control everything, because relationships are 2 people, and 2 people have to choose to stay in them. And if your former partner is choosing out, it's kind of imposed on you against what your values are and your beliefs are, because maybe you would have stayed or toughed it out. But inside of love, the principles of love now, love would also have you respect this other person enough to do your best and to just choose the path of love to the best of your ability. Forgiveness of yourself and others, and to take the high road and to do your own inner work so that you're capable of that. Is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure I really asked a question in the end, so.
You have another question?
No, we have no other questions.
Okay, good. All right, good. Thank you.
Right here. Right here.
Hi, darling.
Hi, darling. This is Michael.
I have a question. Will you marry me again?
Yes, I will, darling.
No.
Hi, Catherine. I am excited to be here because I took your course this fall, Calling in the One, and I was just like, let me just take this course. Everyone's been telling me about this book. Let me do the course and have some accountability. So I love that I was in this course with women and men from across the country, really across the world, and we're going through the whole thing together week after week. And I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to happen, but I'm going to do the work and show up. And so Catherine had us set an intention. And my intention was to call in a relationship by my birthday, which at that time was like 3 months away. And I remember my best friend was like, girl, are you serious? Like, what are you doing? And my birthday just kept getting closer and closer. It was like 3 weeks away, and we usually travel for our birthday. And she's like, where are we going to go? And I'm like, I don't know. My man is coming, so I'm just going to go somewhere with him. We're going to figure it out. I'm doing the intention. I'm thinking about things I need to release. I'm like cleaning up my whole closet, just making space for this man that's going to come. And Catherine, he came. And so I'm just so grateful for the process because I learned so much about myself. And I still feel like I'm learning even in relationships. So my question is just thinking about, maintaining, like you're saying, like when those things still come up for me, that even in the process, I was like, I released that. But then it comes back up sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, how do you navigate that? Because I really do want to honor the relationship and maintain it.
Oh, it's beautiful, and I'm so happy for you. What's his name?
Oh, Lord. Catherine, it's recorded.
Oh. Never mind.
I'm still nervous about it, but
It's
I'm
okay.
happy. But you know how it is.
It's new.
It's new.
It's new love.
I'll tell you later.
Okay, good. Well, but I really love this, and this actually is something I wanted to say to this gentleman too. The part of my decision at the end of the marriage with Mark, and certainly after I wrote Conscious Uncoupling, because you see, Conscious Uncoupling was the first of its kind. My friend, the late Debbie Ford, wrote Spiritual Divorce, so she wrote that maybe over a decade ago. But there really wasn't a book that said, let's do this really well. Let's do this in a kind way. Let's minimize the damage to each other. So at the end of Conscious Uncoupling, I was taking some feedback hits from people in the media who were saying, oh, because Gwyneth put it out there. Everybody makes fun of Gwyneth. So they have good reason to tease Gwyneth, okay? But so people are kind of, saying, well, it's frivolous and you're making this so easy, and I said at the end of the book, you know what? I'm going to really dedicate myself now to distinguishing how to create secure, happy, healthy love as part of my journey now and what I offer to people. So I have courses on it. And actually, I did want to invite you guys to come to a free seminar. I do free teachings in my community. If you just go to Katherine Woodward Thomas up there, you can sign up. I have a free teaching on evolving beyond your attachment style. Because you can. All of us are kind of, up the wazoo as we know I'm insecure, I'm anxious, or I'm love avoidant. And, the labels are great, but they don't access the power to transform anything. So I've been a student of secure attachment. And I want to invite you to that, and you're on the journey now. And, and one of the things that we talk about a lot in our community, too, is what we're projecting automatically on the other person, and becoming conscious. Because, a lot of us are kind of hip to our beliefs in terms of, well, I have a belief I'm not good enough, or I have a belief I'm alone, or I have a belief I'm not safe, right? You guys know, you go to therapy, like, you kind of into awareness about this. But each belief also has a belief about others. So in the I'm not good enough, it's that others are better than me. Or the I'm alone, no one will ever show up for me. Or the I'm not safe, other people have ill intent. Or the I'm not wanted, other people will reject me. So we have to get really conscious of that automatic projection in a moment where we get disappointed, or when we start to feel like we really need that person. We get very anxious around our own dependency needs. That's actually the trigger for our quote-unquote attachment issues. So, a relationship is wonderful because it will give you an opportunity to go deeper and to really apply that. And what you learned in the course was something that we call the self-love power practice, where you learn how to just sit with yourself and you say, Katherine, sweetheart, what are you feeling? Oh, I can see that you're feeling, excited. What else are you feeling? Oh, I can see that you're feeling a little scared. What else are you feeling? So you actually learn how to calm yourself down. And what are you assuming is true? And then you learn the skill of saying, well, the story I'm telling myself, Brene Brown uses that language in her Netflix special, the story I'm telling myself about you right now is that you're angry with me. Is that true? Because most of us believe everything we think and everything we feel. We don't have the ability to step back. So that's a skill in order, love between equals, how we have to grow now in order to have the relationships that we're calling into our lives. So very, very excited for you, and I hope you stay in the community and keep learning together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time for one last question? Yeah, one last question. Thank you, honey. See, this is what love looks like.
Okay.
Thank you, darling.
So thank you so much, Katherine, for your gift of presence and wisdom and love and books in the back that you will be signing soon for us.
Yes, free books.
Yay.
I had them, and I thought, well, we couldn't get a bookseller here, and I thought, well, I'll just bring them and give them as gifts. So,
Very generous. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, you're
So
welcome. Thank you for
wonderful.
having me. Thank you, everyone.
So if you would like your book signed, please line up in the back so Katherine can sign for you. And we will see you at the next Seekers event. Thank you so much for coming. Many of them.
Thank you.